Hey guys, this is the creator talking, not a fictional character, not Taishi, not Zadkiel, whatever. Uh, Content warning for mentions of suicide coming up in this video. Uh, I know it's only like the second video, but I want Jeor'n-Dith to feel like a real world, which means real issues, which means bad stuff comes up. Um, I'm putting a warning around the section. A loud noise will come on. Their chapters will have a mention of it, so you can skip that part if you want. Uh, Mentioning it to just let you know beforehand. Hope you enjoy the video. Bye. Welcome back, everyone. For those of you who don't remember, my name is Taishi, and I will be your teacher for as long as I have information to give you. As always, this is. For those of you who weren't here for the end of the last lesson, today we are covering the continent of North Torin. The most striking feature of this continent is its distance from sea level. As I'm sure you are all well aware, North Torin is floating 7 miles above the sea and is tethered down by huge chains that may or may not actually do anything. One of the main reasons people visited North Torin in the past was to become apprentices or great soldiers of war mages who specifically focused on the offensive side of battles. Obviously, this was after the split and before the war, and as I have just demonstrated, when talking about any of the Torrens, it is impossible to not talk about the Torrent War, or the fact that in the past the four Torrens were all one continent that is known as Great Torin in the modern day. To keep this lecture a reasonable length, I will not be talking about the war for very long. The Torin War is, as its name implies, a war amongst the four Torins, to be specific, North and West Torin allied against East and South. And that ends our segment on the war. More information will be given during a seminar explicitly about the war and not just one of its combatants. Our first real topic is Elysia's gaze is a circle of rocks crafted by the first priests and clerics of Elysia, god of dreams. It allows her followers to communicate with her. A child once asked her to allow everyone to always dream good dreams, and while she is a god and one of the main 15 at that, she did not deem it the best thing to do with her quote-unquote divine wisdom. As such, she created a veil that was deemed Elysia's Embrace, which grants everyone in North Torn to live a full, happy life within the scope of their dream. I try not to input my own opinions so as to not influence your ideas. However, just this once, I will say that I do not believe this to be a wholly good nor bad thing. While I do see the benefits of having a good dream every once in a while, the idea of knowing what my life could be, dying peacefully in the embrace of my loved ones, and then waking up to the actual world, full of wars and deaths and cults and other terrible things happening all the time, would make it seem to some that the dream is what was real, and the real world is a nightmare that you need to be awoken from. Sadly, this has led to some having taken their own lives after awakening, to try and reach that state of bliss again. On a more positive note, the next location is known as the Eternal Volcano. As you might guess, is a volcano that constantly spews lava and molten rock from its vent. The people of this continent see it as a show of resilience and strength more than anything else, and while yes, this is extremely dangerous and not something that people might choose to build a town around, there is an upside and reasoning for this decision. The rocks that erupt are chock full of mithril, making this town the largest suppliers of mithril in Jeor'n-Dith, and by proxy, one of the richest towns. The residents of this town, Mithril it is called, believe that living in the center of the volcano are benevolent flame and rock elementals that create the rocks and fling them from the volcano. However, the inside of the volcano has never been formally studied, no matter how many times I volunteered. The higher-ups of North Torn saw the destruction and danger of the volcano and decided it did require some overview, so they built a building known as the Skyborn Citadel, a large building that more resembles a circling hall than anything else, constructed around the caldera of the volcano. The floors and ceilings of this hall have been lined with arcade runes that create a protective barrier to keep the eruptions from reaching and destroying the surrounding town. The next landmark we will be covering is about the same height and temperature as the Eternal Volcano, however much less dangerous. The Geyser Top Plateau has many attractions at its peak, the most plentiful and titular of which are the multiple geysers that fly at seemingly random times. These geysers leave behind miniature rainbows after they blow, making it a beautiful place for anyone to meditate as long as they can deal with these sporadic geysers. Also on top of this plateau are varying and vibrant foliages, hot springs that double as healing pools, a rock garden where people can meditate, and a temple to Regni made from stone. During the heavenly fortune meteor shower, the plateau is crowded by people because of its label as the tallest, safest point in all of Jeor'n-Dith. Well, this is obviously referring to it being approximately as tall as the eternal volcano and not being, well, an eternal volcano. It is also in reference to one of the gifts given to it by South Torin before the war. Water elementals that have been tamed and now act as a defense force for the plateau, attacking anyone or thing that starts or participates in violence while there. Next on the chopping block is the Aetherholm Isle, otherwise known as the Jewel of North Torin for its intense natural beauty, is a tide island, which simply means it's an island connected to the continent through a thin land bridge. On the island, there are plenty of ruins from times long past. However, the history of this past civilization is lost to time, as any records that were there have been eroded and destroyed. Along with these ruins, there is also a spring that is called the Well of the Cosmos, and within the spring is a swirl of orange and teal liquids that contain the primordial ooze for worlds beyond number. This liquid only retains its powers of creation while inside the well. Some people have done multiple experiments to try and extract this power, as it would allow anyone to become a godlike entity. However, I believe that this is a terrible idea, because there are some people that don't deserve the powers of a god, and those that take part in these experiments are the peoples that I don't trust with said powers. No one is completely sure about how long these ruins or this whale have existed on this island, seeing as there was a thick fog that would magically turn anyone who entered it around. When the continent was mysteriously lifted into the sky, the fog did not move with it and instead kept its place, leading some to believe that the fog is a byproduct of an item hidden under the sea. The last location we will cover today is the Eclipsed Eyrie is where the National Guard of North Torin, nicknamed the Buzzards, reside. The Eyrie is built upside down and is rather castle-like in its architecture as opposed to what one might expect based on its name. Until the Torin War, the structure was abandoned and assumed haunted based on its location and origins. However, these assumptions were put to rest once the Buzzards took over. It was chosen as a strategic spot to watch anyone who enters the continent through airships, and was shrouded in darkness from being underneath the continent. To combat the downsides of this location, runes that could do a variety of things were implemented into the fortress. These runes could do things such as illuminate the fortress, nullify harmful magical effects, lessen gravity for short amount of times to allow for easier movement, and much more. Along with a normal armory, there was a second that held scrolls of powerful spells, and doubled as a library for the scholars that helped in the war effort. When the continent was lifted, it was lifted with this structure already constructed, you could say. As to why this happened is a mystery to this day. And with that said, this concludes this lesson. If you have any further questions, please keep them to yourselves, as they will most likely come up in a future class, and if they do not, I plan to have office hours once these first 10 lectures are finished. As a treat for the people who are still here, the next lecture will cover the Darnic Kingdom. I hope to see you there. Can't stop, won't stop, running to the bag. You lose, I've been running, shit, no, I can't come in last. Can't stop, won't stop, running to the bag. I've been working too long, no, there ain't no time for naps. Can't stop, won't stop, running to the bag. I ain't waiting for a handout, no, these